Luka Doncic is out of shape. That has been the prevailing narrative that has been pushed on NBA fans for years. We see clips of Luka not defending, taking bad fouls, getting hurt, looking exhausted at the end of games. And now this offseason, we get Skinny Luka. We get Men's Health cover photos of Skinny Luka. That Men's Health article, by the way, incorrectly stated that in referring to his increased athleticism as a result of getting into great shape, Luka had a 42-inch vertical at the NBA Combine before the 2018 NBA Draft, which is impossible because Luka didn't attend the 2018 NBA Draft Combine. And they got it wrong because they used the Google AI overview blurb, which somehow confused Luka with Donte DiVincenzo. Even more hilariously, if you search for it, the Google AI summary itself tells you that the article got it wrong because they used an incorrect statement from the Google AI summary. Now, Men's Health did correct it, but much like that article, a lot of things about this Skinny Luka narrative are just incorrect. Oftentimes, when people make this argument that Luka needs to get in much better shape, they go back to early on in his Mavs career. He's quicker, more explosive at the rim. I mean, just physically, he looks much different. But there's a massive disconnect on why he looked so different in 2018 compared to when he took the Mavs to the 2024 finals. I don't think that the difference in these two pictures was an accident. If you go back to Luka as a prospect prior to the draft, there was one glaring weakness in his game: athleticism. People questioned how much he would be able to get to the rim against superior athletes in the NBA, and a lot of people were actually pretty down on Luka as a prospect in general, which had more to do with bias against European prospects because of some other European prospects that hadn't done well in the NBA. And what people failed to see because of that bias was that Luka was unlike any other European draft prospect we have ever seen. I believe that Luka was the best European draft prospect of all time. I've made that argument before. I had him ranked first at the time of the draft. I could not believe that there were multiple teams passing on a guy that was just the youngest MVP in EuroLeague history, all because guys like Mario Hezonja were bad in the NBA. When comparing those two guys as European prospects was like comparing Victor Wembanyama to Zachary Richeche as prospects and somehow saying that they're the same. Okay, that was a little bit of a tangent, but anyway, even with all of that, Luka's athleticism as a flaw was a real thing. And although he was good right away as a rookie, one thing that made him truly great in the few seasons following was exactly the thing people have been complaining about the last few seasons: his size. If you've never watched Luka in person, it's really hard to describe how much bigger he actually is than he looks on TV. He's one of those guys that I just don't think people really see as a physical player until they see him in person, which makes me think that him adding weight was an intentional adaptation to his game. Now, granted, there were times in Dallas that he definitely was out of shape, which we'll get to later, but going back to his draft profile in his rookie season, Luka wasn't going to be able to just blow by anyone. He had to be more intentional and crafty with his moves as he got to the rim, and adding more weight would help him do that. He could get around a defender, and once he had them on his hip, there was literally nothing that they could do with as big and as strong as Luka was. This also gave him the ability to more easily deal with punishing fouls at the rim, and more importantly, gave him a chance to work on his post-up game to add another tool to his offensive skill set. So if Luka's been torching you all game in the pick and roll, and now you want to put a smaller guard on him to stay in front, now he's going to take you to the post. You want to put a rangy defender on him with length and see if that bothers him, he's going to put you in the post once again. Putting on a reasonable amount of weight made Luka basically impossible to guard. There was no real solution to actually being able to deal with him. And to the people that are suggesting that he should get back in the kind of shape that he was as a rookie, I really believe that would actually make him a less effective offensive player. Now, there are obviously negatives to this, and towards the end of Luka's tenure with the Mavs, there were moments where Luka was not in as good a shape as he should have been, but one of the things people point to as to why it's a problem that Luka wasn't in great shape was injuries, which frankly just is not true. Yes, Luka did have some nagging injuries in his final season with the Mavs that led him to suffering a calf injury in December, which effectively ended his Mavs career. And if you wanted to, you could point to that injury as a result of him not being in great shape, and the Mavs certainly went out of their way after the trade. Scratch that, not just the trade. The worst trade in NBA history. After that, the Mavs went out of their way to make sure that everyone knew just how concerned they were about Luka's conditioning, about how he had ballooned to 270 pounds and how they didn't think he was going to age well as a result. But in my opinion, that is a gigantic leap in logic to make when a guy is 26 years old and had suffered exactly one semi-major injury that actually really impacted his season in the entirety of his, at that point, 7 seasons in the NBA. That calf injury was the first time that one of his seasons was actually derailed by injury. If you look at games played for his career, he's never played less than 60 in a season prior to last year when he played just 50, and 2 of those years include seasons where less than 82 regular season games were played anyway. And in every one of those seasons that he did play 60-something games, he still made first team All-NBA, and then in one of those seasons he made the conference finals, and in another, he made the conference finals, and then the finals 8 months before they traded him. And by the way, Nico Harrison and the Dallas Mavericks, if we're gonna make the injury argument, if we're so concerned about how Luka's conditioning impacts his ability to stay healthy, why are we trading him for one of the most injured stars in the entire league? So it's safe to say, I do not see any logic in this Luka has to get in better shape to avoid injuries narrative. Is it generally helpful for Luka to get in better shape to avoid injuries? Yes. Of course, but to suggest that there was a ton of evidence that he was getting hurt a lot and would continue to do so as a result of a lack of conditioning is just stupid. Not to mention, this is not the first time that we've seen Luka get into good shape. There were multiple off seasons in which Luka showed up to training camp in shape with the Mavs, only to suffer some nagging injury that caused him to miss the start of camp. Which brings me to one point that I admit I do agree with. Luka, throughout his career, has had a difficult time rehabbing from injury while also staying in shape. That was a consistent theme in Dallas, and if the Mavs were concerned about that, it is completely legitimate. Not legitimate enough to consider actually making the trade, by the way, but legitimate nonetheless. Now, even though I do think that people are overplaying the skinny Luka narrative, 1, because I think it helps his game to an extent, and 2, because I just don't agree with the injuries part of it, I do think it actually matters to an extent. Regardless of his motivation for doing so, whether it just be him maturing as a player, being around LeBron and seeing how he takes care of himself, feeling spiteful about the trade, or as his camp would tell you, that things were going in this direction with Luka in Dallas anyway if they would have just kept him. Regardless of that, Luka getting in shape with the Lakers is obviously a fantastic thing for them. It shows a level of commitment that we just have not previously seen from him, which is really scary for a guy that at times, even prior to all this, contended for the title of best basketball player on the entire planet. I don't even have like a snarky cutting remark to put here. It's just every time I make a point in this video, I feel the need to make fun of the Mavs for actually trading this guy. Moving on. I actually think that because of how weird last season was for Luka, people are now kind of underestimating his place in the league, and as a result, the Lakers as well. I think most people would still have Jokic as the best basketball player in the world, and the unbelievable season that SGA just had certainly puts him up there as well. But for me, if you're telling me that Luka is locked in and he's healthy, I don't think there's any basketball player on the planet I'm taking over him other than Nikola Jokic. It's arguable, I mean, that's kind of the whole point of rankings like this, but that's where I'm at, which is what makes the Lakers such an interesting team this season, with LeBron clearly upset about something in LA and the franchise pivoting towards Luka as the face of the franchise. Where does that leave them with LeBron? How quickly can they put a great team around Luka? He signed the extension, so at least that situation is put to rest, but they still have a lot of work to do to compete with the Oklahoma City Thunders of the world in the West. All of which is certainly made more interesting by the concept of Luka getting into great shape, even if I think that narrative is overrated and misunderstood.